Welcome to the Bovine Podcast, where we dig deep into the stories shaping the dairy industry. Today we're tackling a legend, round oak rag apple elevation, the bull who redefined Holstein breeding forever. Born from an unlikely mating in 1965, this Virginia-born sire became a genetic supernova, fathering 8.8 million descendants while balancing traits modern genomics still can't replicate. How did a bull dismissed early in his career become the bull of the century? Why do his genes still dominate herds 60 years later, even as genomic models label him obsolete? And what lessons does his story hold for today's breeders chasing sustainability? Grab a glass of milk, settle in, and let's unpack the legacy of the bull that gave wings to the Holstein breed. This is Elevation's story.
Welcome to the Bovine Podcast, where we dig into the utterly fascinating world of dairy genetics. I'm Bella, and today we're talking about a bull so legendary, he's basically the Beyoncé of Holsteins. Douglas, how do you even start explaining round oak rag apple elevation?
Bella, imagine a bull whose DNA is in nearly every milking parlor worldwide. A bull who fathered 10,000 sons and 9 million descendants. A bull who, get this, still influences 14.5% of active sires today, even though he died in 1979. That's elevation.
And get this, he came from a mating that modern genomics would have rejected. Two B-team parents created a genetic superhero. Jim Patterson, former head of Holstein USA classification, said his one career regret was not classifying elevation as 97 instead of 96. That's how much respect this bull commands decades later.
The Smithsonian Institution even highlighted his role in bovine genomics, calling his DNA livestock husbandry's greatest treasure chest. And Holstein International didn't just praise him, they named him Bull of the Century in 1999. That's like winning the Lifetime Achievement Oscar before the ceremony's even over.
So grab your coffee, or milk, naturally, and let's unpack how this underdog from Virginia rewrote dairy history.
So Bella, let's set the scene. Virginia, 1965. Two cousins, Ronald Hope Sr. and George Miller, run Round Oak Farm. They've spent 25 years mixing Burke and Ivanhoe bloodlines, meticulously layering genetics like master chefs. They weren't chasing quick wins. They were building something meant to last generations.
Right. And then they roll the dice on what looks like a questionable pairing. They bred Tidy Burke Elevation, a bull with shaky fertility issues, to Round Oak Ivanhoe Eve, a cow so slow maturing she was relegated to the farm's B team. I've seen her classification card, nothing spectacular on paper.
Today's algorithms and genomic preselection would have flagged this match as suboptimal. But here's where old-school breeder intuition trumped data. They saw something in the bloodlines that numbers couldn't capture. They recognized that Eve's Ivanhoe lineage might complement the Burke influence perfectly.
And boy, did that gamble pay off. This unlikely coupling created a genetic alchemy that transformed dairy farming forever. Elevation inherited milk-producing prowess from his sire's Burke lineage, while getting structural soundness and mammary excellence from his dam's Ivanhoe connections.
Modern genomic analysis later revealed he carried a rare chromosome 6 haplotype that optimized fat-to-protein ratios, something we didn't even have the technology to identify until decades later. Had this mating happened today, it might never have occurred, with algorithms prioritizing faster-maturing dams or sires with stronger fertility metrics.
Yet initially, judges were underwhelmed by his progeny. They kept placing second at shows because they weren't extreme enough in any single trait. They weren't the tallest or widest or most angular, just really good at everything. Talk about being ahead of your time.
The irony is striking. Those average calves could milk strong for 5 to 7 lactations when most cows were burning out after 3. Holstein USA data shows that's nearly double the 1970s average productive life. This runner-up status proved prophetic. While more specialized, flashier bloodlines came and went, Elevation's descendants ultimately dominated both milking parlors and show rings worldwide.
It's like preferring a flashy sports car over a reliable pickup truck until you realize the truck hauls more over its lifetime and costs less to maintain. Elevation's kids were the pickups of the dairy world. This origin story really underscores something I think we've forgotten in the genomic era. Transformative genetics often emerge from partnerships that challenge short-term trends.
Absolutely. Hope and Miller's willingness to prioritize generational potential over immediate returns, coupled with their deep understanding of ancestral trait expression, created a sire whose influence transcended their lifespans. In today's world obsessed with genomic percentiles and quick genetic turnover, elevation reminds us that some genetic treasures lie buried in pedigrees, awaiting breeders patient enough to unearth them.
Okay, Douglas, let's break down Elevation's genetic superpowers. What made him the bull of the century according to Holstein International? Most bulls have one standout trait, but Elevation was the complete package.
5 words define his genetic prowess: production, udder, mobility, fertility, longevity. Let's start with production. His daughters averaged 29,500 pounds of milk in first lactations. That's 15% above 1970s norms. But unlike bulls that sacrifice component quality for volume, Elevation transmitted elevated butterfat and protein percentages too.
That balance is something we now attribute to that unique haplotype on chromosome 6, optimizing metabolic efficiency. His sons inherited this production reliability, with over 10,000 becoming foundational AI sires that standardized high-output genetics across global herds. But production alone doesn't explain his legacy.
Exactly. Udder quality became Elevation's trademark. Charlie Will, who knew these cows better than most, described them as having high and wide rear udders with exceptional shape and symmetry. This wasn't just pretty, it was functional. These mammary systems combined deep foreudder attachments with strong medial ligaments, reducing mastitis risk while supporting sustained lactation cycles.
I've talked with farmers who reported these udders stayed attached 2 to 3 lactations longer than average, translating to an extra $1,200 profit per cow back in the 70s. That's over $7,000 in today's dollars. Not too shabby for a trait many breeders considered merely cosmetic.
Now, mobility might not be the sexiest trait to discuss, but it's a game changer on the farm. Elevation's daughters consistently displayed straight legs with healthy hocks and strong loins. Boring on paper, maybe, but pure gold in practice. These structural advantages minimized lameness even on concrete-floored confinement operations.
This biomechanical efficiency was rare in high-producing cattle of that era. It enabled elevation-sired cows to maintain peak production through 5 to 7 lactations, outperforming contemporaries by 18 to 24 months in productive lifespan. For farmers, that meant fewer replacements and more mature cows in their productive prime.
Fertility might be the most underrated of Elevation's gifts. Though less quantified in his era, it manifested through elevated conception rates and consistent calving intervals. Breeders noted Elevation daughters rebred 14 days faster than their herd mates.
2 weeks might not sound like much, but multiply that across thousands of cows and millions of lactations, and you're talking serious money. Plus, this reproductive efficiency helped his genetics spread like wildfire. This trait was later linked to optimal body condition retention during lactation. His girls didn't milk themselves skinny like many high producers.
Finally, there's longevity, the crown jewel of Elevation's genetic package. While the industry average was 2.8 lactations per cow in the 1970s, Elevation's daughters stuck around for 4.2. That's a 50% increase in productive life. This durability stemmed from his harmonious trait combination. Robust udders minimized early culling, while sound mobility and efficient metabolisms reduced metabolic disorders.
The economic ripple effect was profound. Herds with his bloodlines reported 22% lower replacement costs. For farmers operating on tight margins, this was revolutionary. When you factor in the cost of raising heifers, about $2,500 per head in today's dollars, that's enormous savings across a herd.
But what really sets Elevation apart wasn't excelling in any single category. It was his genetic coherence, the ability to transmit all these qualities simultaneously without trade-offs. It's like getting a sports car with great gas mileage, or a dessert that's both delicious and healthy. Usually you don't get both, but with Elevation you did.
This Swiss Army knife profile made him equally valuable to pedigree breeders chasing show ring accolades and commercial operators prioritizing herd longevity. As Holstein International noted when naming him Bull of the Century, Elevation's balanced genetics forever lifted the breed's floor while raising its ceiling. That duality secured his immortality in dairy breeding history.
Now, Bella, here's where Elevation's story transcends individual cow performance and becomes a business transformation saga. His impact extended far beyond individual herds, profoundly shaping the organizational structure and development of the entire dairy breeding industry.
Absolutely. His influence was particularly transformative for Select Sires, the AI organization that owned him. Charlie Will, Holstein Sire Program Manager there, stated bluntly, Elevation put Select Sires on the map. That's not hyperbole, that's financial reality.
Context matters here. In the 1960s, Select Sires was struggling to establish itself as a newly formed federation of regional breeding organizations. Then along came this bull with his perfect combination of production and type, and suddenly everyone wanted Select Sires genetics. The revenue from Elevation semen sales literally built the company's infrastructure.
George Miller said it best. It's been said that Elevation really built the barns at Sire Power and Select Sires. Think about that impact for a minute. One bull's genetics were so sought after that they funded buildings, grew market share, created brand identity, and helped merge 18 state-level organizations into a cohesive national presence. That's not just breeding success, that's business transformation.
His influence went beyond just financial success. He helped Select Sires develop its market throughout the United States, serving as a flagship sire that established the organization's reputation for quality genetics. He also helped identify Select Sires' brand identity among the Federation of state-level organizations, creating a cohesive market presence.
And the timing was perfect. Elevation's rise coincided with critical advances in reproductive technology, creating a perfect storm of genetic proliferation. His career aligned with breakthroughs in semen freezing techniques and storage systems that extended viable storage from days to decades.
This technological convergence allowed his genetics to be distributed globally with unprecedented efficiency. As artificial insemination adoption accelerated worldwide in the 1970s, Elevation's superior genetics rode this wave of technological diffusion.
His career also paralleled the development of computerized progeny testing and record-keeping, allowing his impact to be quantified more precisely than any sire before him. This data-driven approach to measuring his influence helped establish the systematic genetic evaluation programs that would later evolve into today's genomic systems.
The timing of his emergence, just as regional breeding cooperatives were federating into larger organizations like Select Sires, multiplied his impact, as these larger organizations had greater capacity to distribute his genetics nationally and internationally. This symbiotic relationship between Elevation's genetics and evolving reproductive technologies created an amplification effect that would have been impossible in any earlier era.
And his influence spread well beyond American borders, too. Elevation's semen was shipped to 45 different countries, fundamentally reshaping global Holstein breeding. He basically served as a Holstein ambassador, making friends for American genetics around the world.
In Canada, his impact was especially pronounced through his son Hanover Hill Starbuck, who became the cornerstone of Canadian breeding programs. European dairy industries in France, Italy, and the Netherlands incorporated his bloodlines to improve their national herds. In some countries like France, Elevation descendants eventually made up 70% of the Holstein population.
Developing dairy nations used Elevation genetics to rapidly modernize their herds, while emerging dairy industries in Asia used his bloodlines to establish foundation herds adapted to local conditions. He created a genetic standardization that connected Holstein populations worldwide, a bovine globalization, if you will.
The economic impact of his international influence cannot be overstated. By improving milk production and cow longevity worldwide, Elevation's genetics contributed billions of dollars to global dairy economies. More importantly, his bloodlines helped establish genetic selection systems in countries with emerging dairy industries, creating a framework for continued improvement long after his direct genetic contributions began to dilute.
Starbuck was something special. Standing 73.5 inches at the shoulder and weighing 2,580 pounds, he had the best feet and legs you'd ever see on a bull. Jim Rose's famous photo of him at 5 years old shows why he became a legend in his own right.
The numbers are staggering. Starbuck sired 200,000 daughters across 45 countries. His Canadian impact? The Canadian Holstein Association found that 93% of Canadian Holsteins born between 2003 and 2005 traced back to him. They eventually dubbed him simply the best, a title that begins to explain why his genetics remain influential nearly 3 decades after his passing in 1998.
And Starbuck's sons continued the dynasty. Madawaska Aerostar became one of the first Starbuck sons to be proven and one of the first bulls to sell 1 million doses of frozen semen. His sons in Canada included Moglen Storm and the millionaire sires Startmore Rudolph and Olive Home Aeroline.
Besney Buck's son, Jocko Benz, became particularly influential in France, where he sired more than 50% of French Holstein cattle. Sabbione Bucchi in Italy produced Boss Iron, who became the highest type bull proven in that country.
But Starbuck wasn't Elevation's only influential son. Sweet Haven Tradition, Racali son of Bova, Marshfield Elevation Tony, Ocean View Sexation, and Straight Pine Elevation Pete all made significant contributions. Charlie Will also highlights Mars Tony and Lime Hollow Mars as particularly influential Elevation sons.
What made these sons collectively remarkable was their consistency in transmitting Elevation's balanced trait profile, albeit with individual specializations. Sweet Haven Tradition emphasized the udder traits that became Elevation's signature, while Racali son of Bova amplified the production traits.
Marshfield Elevation. Tony became known for transmitting exceptional mobility and foot structure to his daughters, enhancing their longevity in commercial settings. This diversification of the Elevation genetic package through his sons created a broader platform for his influence, allowing breeders to select specific trait emphases while retaining the core Elevation advantages.
It wasn't just Elevation's sons making history either. His daughters were equally remarkable. He once led the list for the most excellent daughters and for daughters scoring 95, 96, and 97 points, the cream of the crop in classification terms.
Stars like Northcroft Ella Elevation and Twinkie, both EX97 all-time All-Americans, were showstoppers. Ella was supreme champion at World Dairy Expo in 1980, where some declared her the new ideal Holstein cow. She was named all-time All-American aged cow in 1984. Then there were Cora and Lindy, both EXGMD, who produced sons like Carnation Counselor and Townsend Lindy that became influential sires themselves.
The persistence of Elevation's traits through multiple generations is a testament to the strength and consistency of his genetic transmission. As of 2009, Elevation was considered the bull with the most actual descendants in the United States, according to the Holstein Association's sire summaries.
What made Elevation's multi-generational influence extraordinary was not just the number of descendants, but the consistency with which his key traits appeared in cattle, 4, 5, and even 6 generations removed. Today's genomic analyses can identify specific haplotypes that have remained intact through these generations, creating a genetic signature that continues to influence breeding decisions worldwide.
This multi-generational impact has solidified Elevation's place as one of the most central transmitters at the foundation of the modern Holstein breed. A 2019 study found that up to 99% of AI bulls born after 2010 can be traced back to either Elevation or Pawnee Farm Arlinda Chief. That's an astonishing concentration of genetic influence. Bella, here's where Elevation's story gets truly fascinating for modern breeders. 6 decades after his birth, his DNA still runs through 14.5% of active proven Holstein sires. In a world where genetic trends come and go faster than fashion styles, that kind of staying power is nothing short of miraculous.
Yet if you looked at Elevation's current CDCB genomic summary, you might wonder what all the fuss is about. It shows a net merit of negative 821 and negative milk production traits. Negative 2,483 pounds milk, negative 87 pounds fat. But these numbers don't tell the real story.
Exactly. They're comparing him to a modern Holstein population that he helped create. It's like penalizing your grandfather for not knowing how to use an iPhone when he helped invent the telephone. His negative indexes reflect the breed's dramatic shift toward extreme production since the 1970s, not a deficiency in his genetic architecture.
Charlie Will of Select Sires put it perfectly. Elevation's genes form the baseline against which we measure progress. You can't delete the foundation of a skyscraper and expect it to stand. Modern genomic models, calibrated against populations he helped create, inadvertently penalize his alleles while still relying on them as reference points.
What's fascinating is how specific elevation traits continue to persist in elite modern genetics. His signature high, wide rear udders, linked to mammary system haplotypes on chromosome 6, remain prevalent in 78% of bulls with greater than 2,000 GTPI.
His descendants inherit body conditions scoring alleles associated with plus 1.1 livability and plus 4.5 daughter pregnancy rate in current CDCB evaluations. And the elevation fertility cluster on chromosome 18 still appears in 63% of high fertility sires today.
These traits contribute to what breeders call the elevation effect. Cows that maintain production across multiple lactations despite increasing herd turnover rates. Genomics has quantified what breeders long observed. His descendants exhibit 18% lower involuntary culling rates than non-elevation lines, a critical advantage in both pasture-based and robotic milking systems.
Here's another mind-bender. Elevation's DNA makes up 8.3% of the CDCB's genomic reference population. This creates a fascinating paradox where modern genetic evaluations are essentially comparing new bulls against a baseline that elevation helped establish. No wonder 80% of elite genomic young sires carry at least one major elevation haplotype.
Farmers tell me herds retaining 12 to 15% elevation-derived genetics have 22% lower vet costs and 3.2% higher lifetime profits compared to herds chasing extreme genomic numbers. In the robotic milking era, where cow longevity is paramount, this balance matters more than ever.
And sustainability. A 2022 USDA study found his lines reduce methane output by 4.2%, elevations proving that sometimes old genetics solve new problems, like climate-smart dairying.
So dairy friends, next time you cull a plain heifer, remember, elevation's average calves outlasted the divas. Greatness isn't about extremes. It's about cows that last.
For more, visit thebullvine.com. Check out our deep dives on Hanover Hill Starbuck and balancing genomics with practical breeding. And if in Ohio, visit Elevation's Memorial at Select Sires HQ. It's beside their reflecting pond.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep your somatic cell counts low and your breeding goals high.